hoping that we managed to get the mistake changed on that image in time, so people didn't. They might have joined a little bit early because we had EST instead of PST, so it's 4 p.m. PST. We had EST on there, so hopefully still people are able to join live. If not, it will be out there to watch the recording. But Eric, you are joining me today to talk a little bit about China and Amazon and life in general. And it's exactly 1 month to the day that we will be flying to China. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited to go again for sure.
Yeah, it'd be good to see you again over there, man. So let's kick things off with a little bit about yourself. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your history in business? And I know you've been involved in some big things and a lot of things over the years, but talk to me a little bit about your experience in business in general, and then specifically Amazon and China and sourcing and stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm like a corporate marketing guy was most of my career, mostly Fortune 500 companies, either director of brand marketing or product development. Usually had product development, brand responsibility, so create new brands, manage them, advertise them, TV, creative, all of that type of stuff. And then I'd handle what they call the trade or channel marketing with like the national retailers, so Walmart, Target, Home Depot, and that type of thing. So yeah, that's what I did for most of my career. I had a couple of big hits that happened. I had one situation where the timing was just right. We got the marketing right. We did the research correct, and we hit a product that the second year we did $100 million through the cash register. So doesn't always go that way. It's hard to find those big hits.
Well, it's pretty impressive though. Like if you hit enough of one of those, then and one pays off like that, it was worth it, right?
Yeah, totally. And
Cool.
then been selling on Amazon for 10 years now. We actually a little bit different than most. We were right from the beginning in 2014. We opened an Amazon, and then we were one of the first sellers on Walmart. And then so I had some connections there, and so I was able to get our brand listed. We also sell on eBay and then Shopify. So yeah, it's been doing about 10 years now, and we have 5 brands that we sell on Amazon.
Yeah, amazing. Got fingers in a lot of pies there, and I love that multi-channel approach you got going on. And you talk about that a lot, and you sort of share those experiences on Group 4 in Titan, which is like the higher group, which is like 3 million in revenue plus per year. You've been in Titan pretty much since the beginning, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been 3 or 4 years already for sure.
Nice, cool. And how do you find Titan? You've obviously stuck around, so enjoying that.
Yeah, what's funny? I'm like more involved now than I was the first couple of years. You'll see me on most of the workshops throughout the week. I might be working in the background or whatever, but I'm always listening because I pick up something new every workshop I attend. And yeah, there's just some really great information out there. We have the newer one, like the Shopify, the email marketing, and that's a big area I'm focusing on is content marketing right now. And then we've got Rafi with the external marketing going. There's just a lot of really good things that you have to do today to succeed. Where in the old days, we used to list a product, take a picture with your cell phone, create a quick listing, throw a price on it, and it's sold. Yeah, it doesn't work that way anymore. Now you got to be more sophisticated.
No, it certainly doesn't work that way. I remember even when I started like 9 years ago now, it was sort of like the tools weren't there. It was like, I think this might sell. People might want this product. I'll chuck it up and see if people buy it. So yeah, a lot's changed from that, and the Titan tools obviously helps that, and the other great tools that we've got out in the industry. So yeah, and it's great having you part of Titan because, like you say, there's a lot to learn, but having people like yourself with the experience in this area, but also previous endeavors is a big help to our community there. So great to have you as part of that group. But we're here to talk a little bit about China. So you've been to China a few times now, right?
Yeah. In fact, the first time I went by myself. That was in 2018.
Nice.
And I've traveled a lot of different places, Europe and throughout different parts of the world. So like I wasn't too worried about it. But I'll tell you what, when that train crossed the border from Hong Kong into China, everything changed, and I wasn't prepared for it. Like Google was throttled, so my maps didn't work. All of a sudden, like when you're in Hong Kong, the signs they're Chinese words, but they're in English. Yeah, you cross the border, it's all Chinese. getting around on the trains, trying to figure out how to get to, the show, the suppliers. It was probably one of the most stressful things I had done. So I would highly recommend to go with Titan, not by yourself, because it was stressful the first time for sure.
Yeah, it can be. It's funny because when you're in Hong Kong, I can relate to that. You're in Hong Kong, you're like, this is so bad. Everyone speaks English. The road signs are in English. Like, this is fine. And then you cross that border, no one speaks English. Google doesn't work. WhatsApp doesn't work. You need a VPN, and it can be scary. Obviously, we've mastered that now, and obviously, yeah, coming as part of the group, you've got that support around you, which is great. But yeah, we've all been there in our first time to China for sure.
And that was the thing when we went in April, this past April between the two of us. It was just such a more enjoyable experience because I'm with a group of people that know what they're doing. And then you folks have got people that are checking in with us ahead of time. Like, okay, is your visa through? Do you have invitation letters? Do you have all of these different things that you need? And you tell us, these are the things you have to be prepared ahead of time and how much time you need. That just simplifies the process, so, and then, having a good hotel that when there's an issue, you can go to the front desk and say,
Yeah.
hey, and this happened this last trip. On one of the ladies, they needed to travel to a supplier and she had never been to China before. And she was going off by herself. And I said, I don't feel so good about this. Let's, because she wasn't quite sure who her contact she was going to be meeting. That's something you want to vet out, make sure you know what they look like. You do a video call ahead of time, you get all that worked out. So I went with her to the concierge at the hotel and I said, hey, I need a cab at 6 a.m. Somebody that you trust that can take this lady directly to the airport. She's going to travel and then she's coming back tonight. She needs to be picked up at the same place. And they did it. That's how that, Four Seasons Hotel works.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason we go to the Four Seasons, right? Obviously, Athena started this whole thing and she chose the luxury. And we're also grateful for her choosing that hotel. We have a great relationship with them. We get great rates. They include breakfast. You've got great Wi-Fi with a VPN, so everything works. You invite your suppliers to come and have lunch there. They're very impressed. They can see you're a proper business person looking to grow with them, not inviting them to the hostel around the corner or Airbnb around the corner where maybe not so impressive to bring a supplier to try and ask for better terms and lower your cogs, etc. So yeah, having that base and that luxury, especially after 20 kilometers of walking at the fair and in very hot, sticky weather and going down into the booths in the dungeon there sometimes. So coming back to that swimming pool and on the night floor and a nice dinner and stuff is for sure. I agree with you there, man. It's definitely. I don't stay at a different hotel when I go to China, whether it's with China Magic or by myself. And I've been a lot of times now. That's always my base in Guangzhou, at least. So yeah, you spoke about April. So and your first time was in 2018 by yourself. So Canton Fair itself, we know that you have to go prepared, and that, like you said, we prepare you ahead of time to make sure you have a game plan. And I've been guilty of this before. Oh, I'll figure out. I'll take a look. What's there? You can't get around 60,000 booths or whatever it might be. You have to obviously have a game plan, know who your customer is, know what type of products, validated products that you're looking for. And then on top of that, you'll get inspiration about stuff that just isn't on the market, innovative stuff that they've got hidden behind the back and unearthing these gems, but going with a base of an idea of what you want to source. So going to Canton Fair in 2018, I was expecting it to be a little bit different and quieter when we went in April just a few months ago. And that's what I sort of told people what to expect. And I was completely wrong. They bolted on they made it 25% bigger by bolting on Hall D, which we hadn't seen before. It was the biggest opening day or the busiest opening day of a Canton Fair ever. And everybody was just really excited to get back in terms of us, but even more so the suppliers. So what else changed, do you think, from between 2018 and in April in particular? What did you find when you walked into the fair that time?
Yeah, I think one of the big changes that surprised me is that when I was there in 2018, if you mentioned that you sold on Amazon, they kind of looked at you like, well, maybe that's not a big deal. In fact, you kind of didn't mention it too much because they're more used to, at that point, Are you from Walmart or Target or Costco or something like that?
Yeah.
This time around, they're actually saying, oh, are you an Amazon seller? And they're looking for you. Whereas before, they didn't know what to do with you or didn't want to deal with you. It's completely reversed the other way. So that's a big change. And then,
yeah, and I saw there was even some signs on the booths, right? We service Amazon or whatever, trying to entice Amazon sellers in. So they're certainly aware of us now, right?
yeah, for sure. And they're catering to us. They want to talk to you. I think that's one of the things to kind of to talk about in preparation to make the most use of your time is, you want to look at your product categories. And like you said, that show is so big, you can't walk the whole thing. You just can't do it. So you have to know where your product categories are located, look at the supplier list and be prepared. But there's a couple more things you want to do. One thing is that when you're at the show, a lot of times the internet on your phone is pretty hard to get. So you've got to kind of establish your credibility pretty quickly with a supplier. So there's a couple of things there. One, you want to have your business card ready. And it's really helpful to have a picture of yourself on your business card so that they can remember who you are, right? That's the first thing you do. One of the things I do is I have a couple of different, or my business has a couple of different YouTube channels. So we include a card that has QR codes so they can scan it and they can quickly see, oh, okay, these guys are the real thing. Here's their products. Here's their brand. This is what they do. So that's helpful. It's good to have photos of your products and your business on your phone. So if you can't get internet, you can say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And that includes competitors, samples, so you visually can quickly have that conversation. And then I'd even recommend doing a short presentation, printing it out and taking it with you so you can show who you are. A big part of that is like, you want to have a 30-second elevator pitch ready to go. So when you walk in the booth, you say, hey, my name's Lyden, and I'm from Ignite, and we represent all these brands. And all of a sudden you start getting their attention very quickly. Whereas if you come in and you kind of like hemming and hawing and not really going after it, then they don't know what to do with you. And that's a big part of it. Is like, don't be shy. Just don't worry that you don't know these people. Just go in, start presenting who you are, and then ask them questions. Say, anything new for the show? Any new products? I had several situations that happened that were really interesting in April. So this is kind of a funny story. So I brought samples of these hats with me, and I have some ideas to try some things with hats that maybe haven't been done before. So that gets done the whole thing. Don't do a Me Too product. Find something that's different and unique, right? Everything that we teach at Titan. And I come across this hat manufacturer, and the guy says, we're the world's largest hat manufacturer. And I'm like, this is awesome. I found the biggest hat manufacturer in the world, and I have these samples, so I'm all excited. So I pull out my samples and I meet the CEO. And this is another thing that I know I've seen you do some of this just like I do. When I meet like the boss, right? So the boss thing is a big deal in China. They want to meet who you are and then their boss. Right?
You want to meet the decision maker, right? So when we start negotiating, we want someone who can say yes, not I'm going to go and check, and then you don't get the result you want.
Exactly. So you want to find the decision maker, and they want the decision maker from your organization, right? So one of the things that the game I play is that if I get to like a president, CEO, general manager, then I'll say, well, I'm the same. And then I'll like salute like this. And then they'll laugh, so just something, sometimes they salute back but they always get a laugh and then they remember you and it kind of breaks the ice, right?
Of course.
So I met the CEO and talked with him and I'm like, well, who are some of your customers? And he's like, oh, we got Disney, we got Nike, we got Target, we got Costco, we got Walmart. I'm thinking, who do they not have in the US? So these are like the major players. So I'm thinking this is the greatest thing ever. So I pull out my samples and they said, okay, here's our North American contact. He's our sales manager. Why don't you talk to him? So I start talking to him and I said, I want you to quote these products and all this. And I show him my samples. Now, the samples I have are from a company in the UK that's at like professional Olympic level type sporting goods stuff, right? This is supposed to be high quality stuff. And this manufacturer, the guy looked at it, he goes, we can improve upon the quality of this just right at the bat. By me bringing samples to him, he looked at how they're made. He said, I think we can improve upon this. So that was a win right there, right? So now I'm even more excited. And then I said, well, I've got some ideas here. I want to try some things, different materials, maybe you haven't tried before. If you can give me, the right people to talk to, whether you or an engineer, whatever, I'd like to kind of give you some specs. So, that's another thing that Titan teaches is to come in with the spec sheet. and have that kind of delineated. What do I want in that product? What materials? All of those type of things I thought of, ahead of time. So we had a really good conversation. I was all excited. And he said, okay, why don't you stop back by tomorrow? It'll take us some time to quote this, but he may have some questions for me. So I went on along the trade show and talked to other, manufacturers. And that's another thing you want to do is you want to vet multiple suppliers, because you just never know, right? Even if you've got a really good one, they could sell the company, the management could change, the quality could change. So you've always want to have at least 3 to 5 suppliers that you vet and you quote, not just one, right? And this is going to be a case of the same exact thing.
It's a great negotiating tactic as well, right? If I'm going to see my supplier, which we're going to be seeing multiple of them, I'll go to the fair, and next to each other, I can find the same product or similar products. I can get a quote, and then I can go to my supplier and say, hey, you come in 18% higher than everybody at the fair, right? So I don't want to move, but we got to do something here. And then that's a good way of negotiating your cogs down, having different options. And then let's say there's an issue and COVID outbreaks shuts one of your factories down. You have another factory good to go with the spec sheet. They've already met you, and they'll squeeze you in to make sure you don't run out of stock. So I agree with having multiple factories good to go. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Sorry, go ahead.
And that's exactly what happened. So when I showed up the next day and they quoted the product, 2 things happened. So here I'm all excited. I think I've got the world's largest hat manufacturer. Somehow that's going to mean something. They were 20% higher than everybody else I talked to, number one. And then number 2 was the payment terms. So like you and I've talked about in the past, they're much more willing to negotiate face-to-face, right? And so it's easier to get your pricing down, your payment terms down. I mean, in fact, that's a big reason to go to China on this trip in the first place, is if you can improve your cost of goods sold by 10 to 20%, you've paid for the trip, right? So that's another way to do it. So yeah, sure enough, come in 20% high. And then I have these payment terms. So overall, I found that the manufacturers there were more hungry for business than the payment terms they would offer 5 years ago. And I have kind of something I've done. A lot of it came from that original presentation you put together a year or 2 ago about trying to get extended terms, right? So what I try to get is like a 10 or 20% initial deposit to start the order, and then 40% of the order 60 days after it arrives from the port, and then the remaining 40% 90 days after the port, goods arrive at the port. That way I've got time to list the product on Amazon, get sales, and start getting cash to come in so I can scale. So I actually made up a card that has my payment terms on it, and it's printed. And nice. So it looks official, right? I mean, totally, this is what we do.
Yeah.
So when he came back and he said, okay, well, here's our pricing, then I'm like, he's 20% high. And then I said, well, here's our payment terms. And the guy just looked at me and shook his head and said, we won't do that on the first order. So they went from the top of the list to the bottom. So I said, so this is pretty simple.
So did you go for the second biggest manufacturer of hats in the world after that?
Well, it's kind of funny how it worked out, because what I told the guy was, all right, I'm getting all of these quotes for these different product categories, and I'm going to select the suppliers based upon quality, pricing, delivery, and payment terms. And those that give me those 4 things are going to get the POs, and those that don't aren't. And I said, it doesn't look like you're getting a PO today. And I was ready, to do it if you won't agree. So, he put some pressure back on. I said, you better take it back to your accounting department and see if they can get it approved. So he took it back, and then he wanted to come back by the 3rd day. I'm like, I don't have time to come back for a 3rd time. I got to go on and do other things. But in the end, when I found more of like medium-sized manufacturer, they were willing to give me quality product at a good price, good delivery as far as like the lead time to produce the goods, and then they agreed to the payment terms because they were more hungry for the business. So
yeah. It's a very good point, is pairing the finding the right size manufacturer. Because some of these guys, like the order that you're making, and I know that you do very good volume, but compared to Nike, you don't, right? So you're like, they're like, well, why are we going to give this guy terms? Nike don't even get those terms, like whatever. If they're too small and it's a family-run business in rural China, they don't have the cash flow to be able to give you the terms. And you've heard me speak about my approach to payment terms, and that's in the pre-event training anyway. But sometimes I've never met someone that's not willing to do it, but maybe it just doesn't make sense because the volume's not there for them. If they're too big, or if they're too small, they're unable to for their own cash flow purposes. So that sweet spot in the middle. And we always talk about how many employees they have to give you a very quick judge of how big they are, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere like 100 employees to 200 employees is normally like a medium size, which you tend to get the best results from, right? So
yeah, definitely. And that's kind of what happened when it's kind of funny because the first time I talked to some of these medium size suppliers, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to probably go with the large one. But because I had talked to them and they were quoting it and they were looking at the materials and they were just much more interested in doing business with me than this really large manufacturer. Another thing I do, I'm sure you probably do this too, but when I go to these different suppliers and I don't know who they are and they're trying to check me out, I'm checking them out. I'll ask them, who are your US customers? And I'm listening there's like two things I want to hear. One is, what are the retailers? So from a quality standpoint, can they sell at the level of Target, Costco, that type of thing, right? Because they got standards and accreditations and all that. So that's one. The other thing I'm listening for is, well, what brands do you sell in the US? In other words, do they sell to anybody that's already on Amazon? So am I going to be against my own competition, right?
Yes.
And then the third thing to ask is, do you sell on Amazon? And I was finding a little bit more of that there are some suppliers that are going directly onto Amazon. You want to know that because it might be better to deal with a different supplier who's not selling directly against you.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Because they obviously they can undercut you on price, right? So yeah, it might be worth going to another supplier. That's a very good question to ask for sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, sounds like you achieved quite a lot in April. And we talked about having a plan. So what's your plan in terms of your own brands? You've got 5 brands. What's your plan for October? How are you approaching that? And what are the specific things you're looking to try and achieve whilst you're there to pay for the trip and much more?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. So one of them is to kind of fulfill the conversations I started in April. So on one of my product lines that I've imported for a few years, but through another importer here in the US, we kind of collaborate together, share a container and that type of thing. And when I was there in April, and I was looking at the different suppliers to just handle that business direct, on the last one I talked to, I probably talked to like 8 or so. The last one, I noticed that their product was different than the others. And I started asking questions like, how do you make this? And why does this seem different? And all of that. And what I found was that there was one supplier that had a different manufacturing process than the rest. And when I figured it out, I was like, you know what? I want to take this to the US market. So I started negotiating with them. And at first, their MOQs were super high. And so I had to kind of work through that. And that took some time. And in the end here, when I go back, I want to try to finalize this. And here's a couple of things I want to do. Number one, I want an exclusive for not just the US, but for North America, because we sell into Canada and Mexico too. It's pretty easy to answer, right? So I want an exclusive. Number two, I have certain products that I want them to make, but I want to make sure that they won't offer them to anyone else. So I'm always coming up with that unique idea, right? So I want to see if they're willing to sign, a non-disclosure, some type of agreement, and put it in writing that I can have these particular products made just for me, and that they won't take it to the other markets.
Yeah.
And then to get the final overall program nailed down with the payment terms, the shipping, the timing, and all that for this next season, because this is like a spring selling type product. So that was really interesting. It's like one of these things, like at the end of the day, you've probably walked 5 miles by that end of the day, you're ready to go back to the hotel. And I come across this one supplier. I'm like, wow, that's different. And so sometimes by checking out all of the competition in the category, right? So depends which category you're looking at. Sometimes there's more suppliers than others. But the last one, it was quite interesting. And this happened to be a smaller supplier. They didn't have any US business whatsoever. They only did business in Asia. And it was one of the few times where I had a hard time kind of communicating with them. So, another trick is to download Google Translate onto your phone. so that you can use that into Chinese. Usually you don't need that. But on some of the smaller suppliers, they don't send a lot of people, where the larger ones do, and they speak English, right? So you've seen that too. So yeah, that's one of the main things I want to do. I've got a couple other product categories where I've had my team do all of like the product research on it, and then we've kind of identified the opportunity. I've got a list in a spreadsheet saying, okay, opportunity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that we can take a unique idea, something differentiated, and then have these suppliers either do the final quotes or, really wherever I can get it, I'm going to try to get these U.S. exclusives and ask for that.
It's a really good point, because automatically when you set out, or people would set out, they go, okay, I can do COGS or payment terms. There's obviously a lot more that you can do, and exclusivity is something that we managed to achieve across some of the members. And I've managed to accidentally find a product and go, why didn't I think of that? And managed to get an exclusivity deal. On an exclusivity deal, they normally give you a minimum order, and it's normally over a certain amount of time, right? And a region. So yeah, I had some. I was working with a brand, and we used to sell bear claws, as you call them, for like making pulled pork and pulled beef. And we were selling plastic ones, and they were doing great. And we had black ones and red ones. And I walked past this booth, and it had stainless steel ones, like Wolverine. And I'm like, this is the stainless steel version. That's great. I can add that as a variation. It's a free launch, and I can make some money on it, right? So I went and spoke to them and said, can I have exclusivity? They're like, yeah, no problem. I was all right. How many units? They're like, well, you could, like, no one's seen them before. So on Amazon.com for the whole of North America, as you say, I had exclusivity for a year. Beyond that, I tried to extend it. They wouldn't extend it because everybody had the same idea as me. But by that time, I had 1,000 reviews on that listing. I'd had my exclusivity. I've established my product. I've driven a lot of momentum. I had great organic rank, and I had 1,000 reviews. So yes, other competitors came in, but I'd already created a moat around that product. It couldn't be patented, but in terms of protection and defensible products that we talk about in our trainings, I was able to defend that product by having 1,000 more reviews than anybody else's when they launched. So yeah, the exclusivity deals are a huge benefit, right?
Oh, for sure. The other thing I want to get done is on some of the people that I met with in April that were kind of finalizing products to be made for this next season in the spring. Some of the mold costs are pretty high.
Yeah.
So plastic, rubber, metal, and they want you to kind of pay for that mold cost. So one of the things I want to accomplish is go back to them face to face and say, okay, look, how many units do I have to buy over time in order to break even with those mold costs? Well, you'll refund it, so I don't have to just pay for it up front. And then the second thing I'm going to try to do is see if I can't like break it into 3 payments. So I'll say, look, I'll give you 3 orders, and I want 1/3 of the mold cost for each order, so I don't have to pay the entire mold cost up front, so that my launch is more profitable.
Yeah, I agree. Mold costs can become pretty expensive depending on what the product is. And I've done the same as you before. I'm like, we always talk about painting the long-term picture in the relationship. So I'm going to order this many units. So I want you to cover the cost of the mold. The only caveat to that is you want to own the mold, right? You want to make sure they can't use the mold and start selling your design across other things, especially while you're getting a patent, or if you're unable to get a patent, you don't want them using that mold to create other products. So there's a balance there with you own the mold, they can't use it, but I don't want to give you 20 grand up front or $10,000 up front, for example. I want to space that out. And another thing you can do is pay a little bit more per unit. Say, if you can create the mold for me, I'll give you an extra 5 cents per unit for the first 20,000 units or whatever that might be, right? So yeah, there's ways of doing it, but it's a very good point. I noticed that mold costs have been going up recently, so that's a good negotiating point when we get over there for sure.
One of the tricks that I do, and I'm sure you do the same thing, is just to protect myself to make sure no one else can use that mold. Every time I have my logo put in that mold.
Exactly that. So not just a screen printed logo on your product afterwards, but embossing the logo on it, so that in that mold your brand is etched into it, so that it can't be used on other brands. So yeah, for sure, it's 100% protection then. Okay, cool. So What else? What else? So you've got a solid plan for your own, what you want to try and achieve for your own stuff there. But you are coming back as a mentor, of course. So what are you hoping to achieve to support the attendees that are coming? How are you gonna be helping them, and what mistakes do you want to stop them from having, and how do you want to support making sure that they get the most out of the trip?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just to really engage the suppliers. You're there to meet with these people, be on the bus first thing with the group and go, spend your time wisely like that. That's kind of the first thing. Do your homework ahead of time, look at the product categories and then figure out how you can differentiate. So one of the things, like what I would do from a product development standpoint is I would look at a category and I'd say, okay, how can I narrow the focus of this category to create a new product? And that in itself would create a new category. So that's a technique that I would use, either addition, subtraction of a feature or benefit. But I would do that and tell these people, look for something that you can create that's different. I'll give you an example. So when I worked for the paint company, which was Behr Paint, sold into Home Depot, they're big suppliers, like 40% of the US paint market. One of the things we did as a team was to look at the paint category, look at the primer category, and say, what could we do together? And we came up with a paint and primer in one. This was about 10 years ago. Nice. And the second year, it did $600 million in revenue.
What?
It's one of these things. Now, this is like a big retailer, right? A lot of volume, second largest supplier that Home Depot has here. So there's a lot of volume in that type of a product. But the idea is the same. It's not usually complicated. It's really simple. Just what can I either subtract or add to create a new product and or more narrow focus? In this case, it was paint and primer in one. That one product that I developed with my team that was called Deck Over. This is a coating that goes on a wooden deck. What happened was wood stains typically can go on decks for about 10 to 15 years. But if you don't maintain your wood deck, it gets worn out and you can't stain it anymore. So your only choice is to replace it. Well, we kind of hit this like economic slowdown after the financial crisis a few years ago, and people stopped staining some of their decks to save money, which created all these old decks. So then we got together as teams of what can we do about this? And we created an extra strong, extra thick coating that could go over the old decks. And it was called Deck Over. And that one did 100 million in the second year of launch because the conditions were right. And then we were going over the deck. So the product name was important, and Deck Over. And we did TV commercials, people dancing on the deck, that type of thing. So one of the things is just when you're thinking about your product line, you're going in there with a specific target audience in mind. Don't go looking for a single product here or there. You're looking to build a business and a brand and a solution to a specific target audience, not a one-off product. And if you just have that thinking all by itself that, hey, I'm trying to build out a category of products here to my particular avatar, then that'll make you more successful because now you're not just looking for one single product here or there. And then when you can, it's good to do multiple products in the same category because your learning keeps increasing as to about that avatar. And as you study them, like their consumer behavior, there's a lot of things there as like pricing strategy, branding. Who is your avatar? What's their behavior? Are they value conscious? Are they more aspiring to be a luxury brand? I mean, one of the things we used to laugh about back when I was with Black & Decker and we had some products in the luxury space, most of the people that buy luxury products are not wealthy. They're just aspiring to be
wealthy. Absolutely. Yeah.
100%,
through years of research and stuff, we found ourselves, right? But
Yeah.
what I'm hearing there is you're on those products that have done huge volumes, right? You have solved a problem. And that's essentially what you're trying to do with the product. Identify, we're not just looking at products, that looks pretty. I think it would be good for Amazon. It's, okay, cool. Who is my customer? It's a female between 25 and 50 who is a businesswoman who's very busy, blah, blah, blah. What are her pain points in her life? What are her problems? How do we solve them with a specific product? What solutions are there and why are they not good enough? How do we actually solve a problem that she's got? So I think it's great advice. And I often do that as well because we have multiple brands and different avatars. A lot of people's brands will be themselves. They will be the avatar. If it's some musician, perhaps they sell guitar picks and a guitar case and stuff like that, right? But that's not always the case. So we have different brands, right? So I will, if I'm going to a particular thing, I try and, when I'm walking through a particular booth, I'm like, right, trying to think who I am and then try and walk in the shoes of that person. And then ideas start jumping out based on that. So really being in tune in who that customer is and what problems they have in life and how you solve them. So
yeah, that's it. That's it 100%. I mean, it's exactly what I was thinking. It's like you're selling a solution. You're not really selling a product, and you're selling that solution to a specific target audience. So study them, know who they are, how old they are, what are the things that they're interested in. And that'll make you more successful, especially when you've got like other sellers selling from other countries, maybe directly from China. The one advantage we have is that we can really understand, the consumer behavior behind that person and target them in our audience. So if you're selling a solution to their pain point, there's exact words I would have used, just what you just said. What is the solution to the pain point, the problem that they're having that particular time? And then you build a business. If you just go over there and say, oh, I want this product looks interesting, this product looks interesting, but there's no cohesiveness into who the target audience is, you're really just rolling the dice. So that's the part you want to strategically think about. What business do I want to create? What does my brand stand for? What does it represent? Because you're going to need to market that brand to that specific audience. And you're selling the solution more than the product. It's more, it's the benefit that they get from using your product. That's what makes you win versus everybody else.
And that feeds through your entire business model, right? When we talk about our listings on Amazon, we're talking about the benefit to them and how it changes their life and makes their life better, rather than here's the features of the product. We're very benefit led. It's great advice, man. Thanks for joining us. And I think all of our attendees are going to be very lucky to have someone of your experience on the floor at the booth. So they're able to send you a quick message on WeChat or Ding Talk and say, is anybody around here? And you're able to go and point them in the right direction, give them the confidence, because it can be nerve-wracking in a new country sometimes. But we're very lucky to have you on the trip and sharing some of this advice and helping our members for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'd be fun.
Cool. All right. So if anybody, we do have a few spaces left. If anybody does want to sign up to the trip, which is, I'm looking at the 22nd because that's when my flight is, but I think it's 21st in the US still. So around a month's time, we'll be going. There's still time to get your visa, get prepared, get all the pre-event training done. On the 4th of October, Kian and I met yesterday. We're going to have a pre-event call to make sure that you're all prepared and everything's in order before we go. But yeah, if you are interested, go to ChinaMagicTrip.com. I'll drop it in the comments on this live. Or reach out to me directly if you've got any questions about it. So let's finish here, Eric. If somebody is on the fence about joining us in a month's time in China, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I'd say if you're thinking about going by yourself, I wouldn't do that. I did that. It was not a fun trip. It was the most stressful trip I ever took. Go with Titan. The other thing is we do a workshop each night. We touch base after walking the show between Lyden and Kian, Georgie, and we go through what are the challenges? What questions do you have in your specific situation? You just aren't going to get that by yourself. The other thing that surprised me, and you and I had talked about it afterwards because it kind of caught me off guard, but it's a little bit of a camp feel. I mean, you go to breakfast with people, you go to dinner with people. There's people that I had never met before that we form these relationships. And by the end of the week, on the last day when we're saying goodbye at breakfast, there was tears with some people.
There is.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is really something. So it was fun. It was a whole different experience where the first time I went, I'm solo. I'm trying to get back and forth to the show. I'm trying to take trains up and down the place to get to different manufacturers. I don't know where I'm going. You've got people to talk to. Hey, how do I get from here to here? What's the best way to do this? There's just a lot of things that you gain, but you're touching base every day with the team. And so when you meet with a supplier and then they ask you certain questions, you can come back and talk it through. And then there'll be some content each night, right? There's a bit of a workshop. And so we go through the content. This is how you negotiate with the Chinese suppliers. This is how you present your products, all of these different things. The funny thing is, after all these years of doing this, I think I know something, but I think the more I learn, the more I realize what I don't know. because a lot of times I ask a question and then I think I know where Keon's going to go, kind of answer that, or you're going to answer that. And I get a totally different response I hadn't thought of. And so just the learning of that, because if you can improve your cost basis just by even a small amount, it'll pay for the trip. Usually you can make some pretty big decisions there. I mean, for me, like on this one supplier in camping products, I think I cut my cost by like 40%. So that way paid for the trip.
Yeah, that's paid for your next 10 trips, man.
Yeah. And then we're all together, we're helping each other.
Yeah.
There's a lot of camaraderie that goes. It's just, there's a great attitude. People are helpful. They're going there because they want to improve their business. They're serious about it. All right. They're not just goofing off or whatever. And it just was.
It's nice to see the relationship build and that abundance mindset that we bring through in Titan of helping each other and people going to booths together. So in April in particular, myself, you, Kian, Georgie, Matt, Luke, we're all on the ground, like messaging in the group chat. Anybody need any help? No, we're good. We're like, well, we taught them quite well. But then when you actually walk past the booths, people are buddying up and they're conferring notes from what Kian suggested about what to ask about, size of the factory, what certifications they have, going with the product spec. And they're that well prepared and helping each other out. And then people are putting in the group chat or at dinner in the evening saying, I need to go to Ningbo, but I'm a bit nervous to get a flight by myself. I go, well, I need to go to Ningbo too. Let's go together. I'll come to your factory. You come to my factory and we'll fly back together. Or we'll stay in a hotel together. So seeing those guys sort of buddy up and help each other out, it does feel like a camp and it does really bring everyone together. I mean, I know this because I met Athena, who's my business partner, right, in China. I met Justin Dyson, who's one of my best friends, and Kian and Andrew Erickson, and some of my best friends and colleagues in Titan I met in China on China Magic. I can't forget Georgie. I met Georgie in China as well, right? So it is something about being on this adventure together that really brings people together. So yeah, I'm right with you there. So yes, and we'll wrap it up there. I really appreciate your time. And hopefully a few people got some value out of that. I know I certainly did. So if anybody does want to join, it's ChinaMagicTrip.com, or you can reach out to myself, or Eric won't mind if you want to send him a message on Facebook, then we'll answer any questions. But Eric, once again, thanks for your time, and I'm excited to see you in about a month's time.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me on.